We continue to unsuccessfully find the lowest common denominator.
You got pretty
successfully. What do you mean unsuccessfully?
We haven't hit bottom yet. That's what I'm saying.
There is no.
So far, the LCD is yet to be defined.
You got really close last
LCD.
week. Last taping.
For what?
You don't remember the entire segment Nick had to take out? Welcome once again to Free Associations from the Boston University School of Public Health, the Public Health and Medical Journal Club podcast for anyone who is as confused by the latest health study as I am by the slang that my kids use. I would like to know why everything is lit and shook and quaking. That's what I want to know.
Instead of wicked.
Instead of wicked or awesome or totally.
Or pissa.
Yes, which is seems to be a Boston type thing.
Yeah.
Piss up?
Wicked. Wicked, of course, is
clearly.
totally.
Yeah,
Wicked.
yeah, and that's ancient.
Wicked awesome.
Oh, geez, Jimmy wrecked the Camaro. For example.
I'm Matt Fox from the Department of Epidemiology and Global Health, and I'm here with Chris Gill and Don Thea
Hi, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
from the Departments of Global Health here at the Boston University School of Public Health. And as always, we are here in the Boston University Godley studio. So guys, we're getting into the Christmas season. This year, we got our Christmas tree from a new place. We got it from the Population Health Exchange website. Yeah.
So you can exchange your Christmas tree?
Well, okay, we didn't get a real tree, but instead it's more of like a tree that symbolizes a resource hub for lifelong learning is what we really got. So you can go to this website.
God. This is where you have
stretching it.
an old population health and you want to change it for a newer
That's
one.
exactly what it is. You can exchange it. So this is Boston University School of Public Health's resource hub for lifelong learning tools, programs, and classes. Just a reminder to everyone, there's still time to sign up for the PHX Winter Institute. So the PHX Winter Institute is going to be a little different this year, as we've talked about on the podcast. This time, it is going to be all online, so you don't have to be in Boston if you want to sign up for some of the great PHX courses. So this year, the Winter Institute is the same great programs as last year, but better travel conditions. You don't have to sit in a middle seat to fly here to come to the program or sit in hours of Boston traffic in order to get here. You can do it all from the comfort of your own home, wearing your PJs like I would. But just a reminder, those programs that we have available is a course in GIS, a course in story maps, and one in biostatistics with SAS Jump. And these are fantastic courses. So head over to the Population Health Exchange website to sign up for those at www.pophealthex.org. We do always want to remind you to go give us a rating on iTunes or your podcast app to help other people find us. And also a big thank you to everybody who wrote in with a haiku review. It looks like at this point we have found all the haiku writers and they are getting little mugs well, they're not little mugs, they're mugs and other goodies, I guess, being sent to you. So thank you very much. I also want to point out, so we just had, if you look at the download stats, we just got 25 downloads in Indonesia.
Indonesia.
Which means either somebody has downloaded all the episodes in Indonesia or 25 people have all signed up and downloaded an episode in Indonesia.
Or some permutation thereof.
Or somebody's traveling there,
Didn't
maybe.
your family just take a vacation in Indonesia?
Yeah, I do tell them to download wherever they go, which is why we got so many in Tanzania that one time. Right. Anyway, now onto the show. So today in our first segment, which is our journal club, we are going to look at a study that I am kind of surprised in a way that we haven't gotten to before. But this one is about organic foods and whether or not they cause cancer. And I should say up front that we just today had a listener write in and request that we do this study. And coincidentally, after we had already decided that we were going to do it. So great minds think alike. So thank you for sending in that request. So in the second part of the podcast, which is our deep dive, we will talk about data safety and monitoring boards and what they are and how they fit into the big picture of medical research. And then in our third segment, which is our amazing and amusing, we will get into some things that make us laugh out loud or helped me get through yet another rendition of Mariah Carey singing Christmas songs.
Oh, I hate that song.
Can't do it. I can't do it.
My all-time most hated songs.
My kids play it over and over, and I'm slowly losing it.
The other one that drives me over the edge is Feliz Navidad.
Yep. No, that's a yep.
Oh, I love Feliz Navidad.
Of course you do.
I cannot stand that song.
I love that song.
No.
All right. Should we do segment 1 then?
I don't want to wish you a Merry Christmas.
Oh, now it's going to be in my head the entire podcast. All right. So, segment 1, we are getting into an article that looked at the effect of organic food on cancer risk. So, this one was published in JAMA Internal Medicine by first author Julia Baudry, and I can't even do this, so I'm going to try my best, of the Centre de Research Epidemiologique.
Something in French.
I can't. My French is terrible.
That's good enough. That works for me.
Sorbonne, Paris, France. Was that even passable?
The Sorbonne. That's a
All right,
university.
somebody can edit that out later and overlay somebody speaking in perfect French.
Centre de recherche épidémiologie et statistique Sorbonne Paris Cité.
All right. The study was titled The Association of Frequency of Organic Food Consumption with Cancer Risk, and some headlines. As you would imagine, this got a ton of press. So I picked out some headlines. So Newsweek says eating organic foods linked to lower cancer risk. The New York Times says, can eating organic food lower your cancer risk? USA Today, does eating organic food prevent cancer? Yes, a new study says. Business Insider Singapore, which I picked that one because I just like the headline. Scientists are learning that eating organic might be tied to a lower cancer risk, but there are some big caveats.
That was a pretty good, summary of their data.
I thought that was a good one. I thought
Might,
that was
could. He's very, very cautious. I like that.
Yep. The Guardian says, don't believe the hype. Organic food doesn't prevent cancer.
Oh, wait a minute.
wow, look at
That's
that.
not what it said.
I'm with you. And then I don't know what the Elite Daily is, but I pulled this off just because I like the headline. The health benefits of organic foods might actually be worth the extra cost, science says.
No.
That's reading a lot into things.
No.
That's a value judgment.
That is a value judgment. So
They should read the fine print there.
yeah.
Absolute risk reductions, for example, being and we'll get there.
We'll get there.
But I'll just preface this is a how do we call it?
What do you call
Trailer?
it?
Foreshadowing. A foreshadowing, right?
Yes.
Absolute risk reduction, small.
Dun, dun, dun.
Small.
Okay.
Anyway,
If real.
All right. Done.
Matt.
What is this study all about?
All right. So this is a study that attempts to, as we heard from the titles that you just read, make a connection between the increased dietary intake of organic foods and cancer. And this is built upon a study, at least one study that the authors report previously that seemed to indicate that there was a connection. But it was a while ago, and it depended on recall, and there were a lot of other problems with that study. They also cite the fact that there has been a risk that's been associated with the ingestion of pesticides, which is the sort of the hypothesis that they're trying to promote here, and cancer risk, but in occupational settings where the exposure to pesticide would be considerably higher than you would expect to get with a non-organic diet. And other bits of information that they cite also is that in the United States, apparently 90% of us have detectable urinary levels of one or another pesticides.
I can believe that.
So it really is an exposure out there. And the issue is there a way for us to design a study that's going to actually try to make a sound correlation between the ingestion of organic foods and presumably lower pesticides and the development of cancer. So this team, which, as Matt said, was from France. And in France, they're using a web-based database that was set up in 2009. And this database, which is called the Nutrinet Santé Study Database, and it's a prospectively followed cohort of volunteers that were collected through this web-based interface, where they were asked a bunch of questions early on, very extensive questions about their dietary habits as well as their activity and demographics and all the rest of that stuff, as well as food frequency with respect to a whole host of different food groups, as well as whether they obtained food. They consume food that was organic frequently or not frequently. And so they then, based on that enrollment questionnaire, they then followed this group of people on average for about 5 years thereafter. The baseline questions were broken down into about 8 modalities where they asked them whether their consumption of these various food groups, as well as whether they consumed organic or non-organic food, most of the time, occasionally, never because it was too expensive, never because I'm not interested, never because I avoid such projects, never for no specific reason, and I don't know. And then they assigned a score, which they call the organic score, which was from 0 to 32. And for that score, based on those modalities, they assign points. So an individual would be assigned 2 points if they consumed organic or non-organic foods, most of the time 1 point occasionally, and 0 otherwise. And they use these to calculate the daily mean consumption that these individuals consumed of organic foods at that point in time, at the beginning in 2009 of the follow-up. And as I said, they followed them prospectively for, on average, 4.5 years. They also merged this database with National Health Insurance and Death Registry database, where they were able to cull from those databases instances of cancer. And I think one unique aspect of the study is that in every instance of cancer, I think 90% of the time, they were able to obtain medical records from the physician, as well as have physicians on the study team review the medical records of those outcomes, of those cancer episodes. So to me, that imparted a little bit more credence to the outcome. They broke the organic score into quartiles, and basically all the analyses were done essentially comparing the first quartile, which would be the lowest consumption of organic foods, to the fourth quartile, which was the highest consumption of organic foods. They started out with 95,000 individuals who completed the food questionnaire. They omitted those people who had prevalent episodes of cancer, as well as those people who had a sufficient follow-up information, and they went from 95,000 down to 69,000 individuals on whom the analysis is done, which is about a 28% decrease. There were 1,340 incident cancers that occurred during the observation period, and about 60% of them were either breast or prostate. Breast was 34%, prostate was 23%, and the remainder were skin and a small number of colorectal cancers.
Some lymphomas.
And some lymphomas, yes, absolutely. Now, when they looked at the baseline characteristics of this cohort of people, they found that it was 78% female. And those individuals who had a higher organic score, those who tended to consume a higher number of organic foods, tended to be female, tended to be wealthy, more highly educated, had more physical activity. There were more former smokers, and there were more women of postmenopausal status. There were differences also in that fourth quartile in terms of the quality of the food. So those individuals tended to have a healthier diet. They had more fiber, they had more vegetable proteins, more micronutrients, and fewer red meats and other meats, poultry, and dairy products. So what they did was they basically did a whole series of comparisons with adjusting for a whole series of covariates, a lot of which you would expect, like family history of cancer, postmenopausal status, whether they took, if they were female, whether they took hormones postmenopausally, and food quality. And when they made that...
smoking.
And smoking, yep.
Which is an important one.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. Alcohol intake. So all of the obvious covariates were thrown into the model. And when they did the comparison, they came up with a 30% reduction in all forms of cancer, essentially, between the high and the low organic food consuming groups. And they did an analysis with food quality, and my sense, I didn't quite follow that analysis, but my sense was that they were able to control for food quality, and that did not seem to change the effect that they saw.
Chris and I totally understood the analysis, but unfortunately we don't have enough time to go into it. So
Right. And when you drill down to the actual types of cancer, they found an association only with postmenopausal breast cancer in postmenopausal women and lymphomas.
statistically significant.
Right.
Okay.
But there were also the lymphomas and the skin cancers and the postmenopausal breast cancers had the lowest hazard ratios as well. So they were the most pronounced effects, irrespective of statistical significance.
Yeah, yeah. And there were some other imbalances, I think, in the between the first and the fourth quartile. The postmenopausal status in the first quartile was 16% versus 24% in the fourth quartile.
Yep.
What was the other one? There was a lower BMI in the fourth quartile, or those individuals that consumed high levels of organic food had a lower BMI, and alcohol intake also was lower. And smoking, I believe, was lower.
There were some imbalances between these groups that they had to deal with statistically, although some of them seemed to go in a direction that I wouldn't have expected, and we can come back to that. But before we do, I want to ask you both, before we dig into the critique of this, did you have or can you remember having a prior belief about this before you read the article?
Oh, yes.
What was your prior?
My baseline assumption is that there would be no risk.
No risk.
Well, no. Let me take this back. My baseline belief is that there was no association. My baseline assumption is that the study would find one.
Yeah,
which is a little bit different.
Based on the title?
No. So let me quantify. My assumption is that
I know exactly what he means.
They would report a risk, and that I would not believe it.
So what I wrote down here is I'm open to small effects, but I also have a prior that says the study is likely to be confounded.
Yes.
So I'm open to the idea. Actually, I can believe that there would be an effect, that it wouldn't be a huge effect, but that there could be an effect. But I am also my prior was that it's going to be very hard to control the confounding here.
Yeah. Totally.
Don,
I completely agree. Plus, it keeps coming back to the same problem that I have articulated many times before about nutritional studies, in that you're biopsying their behavior at one point in time and then following them prospectively over a longer period of time and assuming that their behavior remains constant.
But they did something a little bit different from some of the other studies we did in this regard, which is at least that they measured the food frequency on multiple occasions, just to sort of like try to stabilize the baseline to some degree. But I agree that it's still a single point in time.
Wait a second. They asked them to indicate what their intake was on 2 weekdays and 1 weekend.
Right.
During that initial
So it's still the baseline.
period. So it's still the baseline. So it's really 2 weeks at the beginning of a 7-year follow-up.
But they had plausibly a more accurate
Slightly.
baseline.
Slightly.
But still,
Right. Your point is totally on the
Tiny.
nose. Yes.
all right, Chris. So I'm going to come back to the prior thing, but give us your take.
Yeah,
Chris,
so
what's your...
I totally, I love the way you set that up, Matt, because, if the listeners will go back 1 or 2 episodes, I don't remember which it was, there was one of the papers we reviewed, it was the one on dementia and herpes simplex, and we were all struck and skeptical of the magnitude of the benefit of herpes simplex drugs.
It was a massive protective effect.
And in a way, that was the most, I think, damning thing for us in terms of
Too good to
disbelief. It was too good to be true. And here, I felt like this was the situation in mirror image, where I predicted that either there's going to be no effect, or the paper will report effect. But if there's an effect, it's going to be a small effect.
Yeah.
But actually, they found a small effect. On a relative risk, it was maybe a largish effect, but on an absolute risk version, it was like a difference of 0.6%.
0.6%,
which is very small.
Over what, about 4.5, 5 years?
Over a 4.5 year period. So the fact that the magnitude of the absolute risk reduction was so small kind of left me feeling a little more positive about it, because I felt like, to start with, that they hadn't oversold their data.
The other problem that I had,
I don't know if they oversold, but that you're saying that you think that the effect probably wasn't overestimated.
I guess that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, Don.
The other problem that I had with it is that we know that cancer takes a long time to develop.
Yep.
And it's something that develops really over decades, oftentimes. And it could be, you could postulate that the biopsy of the feeding behavior at that one point in time in the beginning of the study is reflective of what has been going on for antecedent years and decades. But
that if you're consuming a lot of organic foods now, you probably were consuming more back then.
Or
That's
possibly not. Or possibly not. So
it's not really a 5-year window. It's probably actually the 5-year window.
It could be
plus
longer.
A decade or two in the previous period.
But that doesn't make me any more comfortable, because that increases my level of uncertainty about what's really going on. It's hard for me to believe that that what they were being the pesticide level that they were being exposed to at the beginning of this study was causative for the cancers that they saw in 4 years or 5 years from that point. So it's just not enough time.
Can I respond to that? Because I had the same concern, and here the specifics of the associations with certain kinds of cancer tended to increase my willingness to accept the results for exactly that reason. That is to say, breast cancers we believe are slow to develop and take cumulative genetic insults over many years, maybe decades, and are also filtered through the lens of an extremely powerful effect on hormones, which should have relatively little to do with pesticide exposure, albeit that some pesticide exposures can have an estrogen disrupting effect. But otherwise, I think the dominant hormones in the body are human hormones, estrogen and testosterone. And so in that regard, the fact that the most powerful association was seen with lymphomas, which have the shortest lead time in terms of developing from normal to abnormal, made me think that perhaps there's something more to this, because that felt to me more like a direct DNA disrupting, insult, as opposed to breast cancer. You would think that the DNA disruptions are relatively less important compared with, say, the background genetics related to hormone receptiveness.
Okay.
So I thought that was
Fair enough.
a relative plus in this.
Because the effect was, what was it? The hazard ratio was 0.24 for all lymphomas as opposed to 0.66 for postmenopausal breast cancer. So
That's right.
A bigger effect for lymphomas.
A much bigger effect.
Yeah. So I think that when we go through these studies of anything dietary, I do think you're right, Don, that we've got to be thinking that if this is going to mean anything for some of these cancers, it's got to be an indication of more consumption of organic foods at an earlier time period, because the time window otherwise probably doesn't make so much sense, except maybe for the lymphomas. But leave that aside. So we know then we've got a misclassification issue. As you know, in general, I try very hard to think about not just to say there's a misclassification issue, but what would be the direction of the effect. I think that would probably bias towards no effect, though I can't say for sure, because it does seem, I suppose theoretically it's plausible that if you were exposed to a lot of pesticides, at a younger age, you could try to make up for it by eating more organic foods later on. And so the behavior would actually be, current organic food use would be correlated with past non-organic food use. But I think that's really a just so story that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So misclassification is one issue. The other thing we talk a lot about when we get to these dietary studies is confounding, the idea that you've got all these different things that come together. And of course, if you're eating more organic foods, you're by definition going to be eating more vegetables, right? You're going to be eating healthier foods. But so it's hard to...
Plus a million other things that you do differently in your life.
Plus the behavioral things, right? But even just on the consumption of nutrient level, if you're eating more organic foods, aren't you by definition eating probably
Less
more
other things,
more vegetables? I mean, it's not required, right? Because you could.
But didn't they control for that?
Well,
they put those in as covariates.
Yeah, I don't know that I totally believe you can explain that away. But hang on.
So let me follow up on that. Let me push back on that, because what you're basically saying is that they built this model. They had a lot of outcomes. They had a big data set, and they threw in.
Stop saying they threw things in. They gently put in
maybe 20 covariates, all of the ones that we talked about. Are you saying that you feel as if it's not that you don't quite believe the ability of the model to control for those covariates versus other covariates? I think
from a nutritional standpoint, you can't separate the two out very easily. That when you are looking at organic,
which is confounding,
organic. Well, it's confounding that you can't remove. When you're looking at organic, you're talking about vegetables, and so consuming.
No, you can talk about organic poultry, organic meat.
It's true. But I
no
suppose
hormones
and
organic,
milk, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So maybe I'm overstating things, but I still think you've got those two factors coming together. But here's the thing that kind of surprised me. So when you talk about confounding, I have a stereotype in my head of what this looks like. So, and you started to kind of lay it out that if you eat organic foods, you're also going to exercise more, you're going to smoke less, you're going to probably be in a higher socioeconomic
Sleep
status.
more, you're going to meditate,
You're going to do a lot of different things. And yet it seemed like there were some things that were not associated in the patterns that I thought. So higher organic consumptions, if I understood correctly, seem to be associated with less exercise and with a history of cancer. Though it was associated with some things that I would expect, like so less smoking, less alcohol consumption, less red meat consumption, less processed meat. So those made sense, but the history of cancer and history of cancer makes sense to me in that you might consume more organic food if you were more worried about cancer. You had a family history of cancer, but then your risk for cancer presumably is higher if you've got a family history. So that makes sense, but it is a potential confounder. And then and the less exercise kind of threw me a little bit. You're getting less exercise if you're eating more organic. But here's the kicker for me, is that look at their if you look at their model. So you're saying they gently place these things into a model.
Ram them into the model.
Thoughtfully hammered in.
So we get these multivariable estimates, but somewhere they give us both the crude and the adjusted estimates. Where am I not finding that? But I remember they gave us both, and maybe it was just in the text, but nothing changed
When they adjusted?
Yeah, the adjustment didn't do anything. So that suggests to me that there really isn't confounding, that or measured confounding, I should say. That I don't know. Something seems a little
Or the data
Funny about
skiffy.
that.
or that. And my guess is that's it. It's that there's limited ability to actually measure the confounding well. But I mean, we have some of these things that seem imbalanced, as you pointed out. We don't know how associated those things were with cancers, so you can't tell for sure what you'd expect to happen from a data standpoint. But from just a logic standpoint, to me, something should be going on. It just seemed a little, little strange to me.
One of the other issues that I had with this was that it's logical and it makes sense that exposure to dietary pesticides would have an increased propensity to cause cancer. And their presumption is that based on the questions that they asked, but they did not validate the questionnaire. They're making the assumption that the answers to those questions with respect to the amount of organic food consumed is, in fact, there is a direct correlation with the amount of pesticide consumed. And they did not validate that. And I think that would have been really helpful if they had gone to the individuals and they had taken a very small sample of those individuals and they stratified them by high-low, first and fourth quartile, and then they measured the urinary output of, pesticide metabolites. Because
exactly the same concern.
It's a leap of faith, I think, that leaves me, unsettled about this.
It's a proxy. I mean, this all is in some ways the mirror image of the Subaru kayak roof rack metaphor that I brought back.
Which episode was that? The
that
Subaru kayak roof rack
About 4 episodes ago.
metaphor.
Yes, it's a good one. But here, of course, it's a little bit more proximate because we're not talking about like a Subaru kayak roof rack, which clearly has nothing to do with anything other than as a marker of socioeconomics, right? Whereas the consumption of organic foods could be an exposure, or it could be a reflection of socioeconomics, or it could be both. In fact, it's almost certainly both. So, but you got wandering through their table 1. I thought this was kind
table
of
1. So this is the descriptive table
of the
comparing
quartiles.
Who are the
quartile
populations?
groups, who's in there.
Right. So we've got the lowest consumers versus the higher consumers, and I thought this would just be kind of like an interesting case study to sort of consider the myriad overlapping webs of confounding that may exist here. So if you kind of like run down the list and you look at the Q4, the highest quartile versus the lowest quartile, you've already mentioned that they were much more likely to be female. They were on average older. They had, they were more likely to work in managerial roles in their jobs and less likely to do manual labor. They had higher education levels. They were wealthier. They were more likely to have been former smokers, which makes sense because they're older, and you're more likely to become a former smoker the longer you live. Right? Because, right?
So what do you think about cohabitating?
That's a funny one. Let me keep going.
Why was the highest quartile more likely to cohabitate?
I am a fan of cohabitating, Don, Thea.
That's
but I don't.
immaterial.
That's a non sequitur.
The phrasing there was weird, though. The way you asked that.
I don't think you're asking me if I would like to
That's what I
cohabitate.
thought you were asking.
No. Okay. Because you got a new condo.
I think
it was 80.
Wait a minute. I think we should do we should bring back the Odd Couple.
No.
No.
No, let's not do that. Anyway, so you can sort of look at this, and they were less likely to use hormonal conception, contraceptives,
Yep.
and
All
on
kinds
and
of
on and on. So all of these things, like there was all of these variables you can see are bound to be confounded with many of these other variables, and then all of these variables therefore probably exist in sort of this web of intricate confounding in different directions, and with multiple directions of causality implied by these relationships, which are hard to untangle.
Yep.
And I always wonders, like, how can we really adjust for that using a logistic regression?
I agree. What
Is
is
there-
this about the
Chris?
magic of logistic regression? Can I really do that? I
that really work?
fundamentally
First of all,
don't believe it.
I hate logistic regression. You know that. But no, the answer is it can't. So, okay.
Oh, we control for that. That's always the answer. Oh, yeah. No. We control for that in the model.
Well, so, right.
believe
So, right. Okay.
It does raise one's level of
We gotta stop
skepticism
beating up on
because
math.
it's just so complicated.
Okay, so here's a question. So we I think we all agree that well, I don't know. I shouldn't say. Do you all agree that there is probably something going on here, but it's not very large?
No, I don't.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, maybe 0.6%. It's like, turn that into a number. 1 out of every 200 cancers would have been avoided through the hyperconsumption of organic vegetables versus the least consumption of organic foods.
I think it makes potential sense, but I don't think these data convince me that there is an effect there.
Okay. So the question is, are Chris and I more believing in this study than, say, so many of the other dietary studies for which we have been more skeptical, probably much more like you are with this one, because we went into this with the open to the idea that there probably is something small going on. Are we influenced by, in other words, we as a group are generally not super excited about dietary studies. No. We think they've got all kinds of problems and they're very hard to believe. So why this one, are Chris and I kind of okay with this? Is it because we're seeing what we expected and therefore we like it?
Let me ask
because
a question.
It's got the same
Let me
problems.
ask a question.
It's got the same problems.
How many times a week do you shop at Whole Foods, Matt?
I do not shop at Whole Foods.
Trader Joe's. How about Trader Joe's?
I shop.
They're not organic.
Aren't they not?
I don't
No,
think so.
not necessarily.
How
no.
about you, Chris?
Are they inorganic? I don't go to Whole Foods very often, but we go to Donnellan's, which is like the local Whole Foods. I go there all the time.
And you, Don?
Never.
Never go.
No, it's too
Yeah,
expensive.
no. So I don't go there. So that's not my.
Pisses me off when they
it's-
then they jack the price up for no reason
It's
whatsoever.
not. It's not my thing. But I'm
So
just saying.
Those are our biases.
No, but I'm just saying. So why, Chris? Why do you and I are a little bit lighter, easier on this one? Why are we more like to believe it, given that we clearly think it's got the same problems as the previous studies?
So I want to sort of air my caveats. I am not convinced that there's a causal relationship here, but I'm willing to believe that there might be based on these data. And in any case, the magnitude of the cancer-causing risk or cancer-reducing risk of consumption of high rates of organic foods versus low rates was so small that it almost feels to me like either, regardless of whether it's right or wrong,
You wouldn't
the
change your
magnitude of the
behavior?
effect is irrelevant.
I wouldn't say it's irrelevant.
This is not a way to reduce cancer at a population level through organic foods. This is not going to do it.
I don't quite fall on that line because it's plausible to me that if the effects are real, that they're underestimated here because of the way that they're estimating it. I suppose it's possible that it's going the other direction too, though, for all the reasons that we talked about, all the confounding reasons. So I'm open to it. I don't know why, and it's just been troubling to me that I read this one going in thinking, there's not going to be much going on, and it's going to be confounded. But maybe there is something small there. And then I read it and I thought, I'm kind of mildly convinced by this one more than the other ones, and I don't know why. And so the question I think for the listener is, the feedback that I would like from our listeners is, should we stop doing dietary studies completely?
Yes.
I mean, should we? Because
But they're the ones that are of the most interest
and they're
to
the
the
ones
public.
that get the most press, right?
They
Because
do.
we all
That's
care,
true.
we all eat.
It is the BS paradox of epidemiologic research.
I don't know what exactly your
Well,
paradox that is.
the dietary. I guess Ioannidis said this so well that the public is intensely interested in diet.
Yes.
And so these studies got outsized publicity in the lay press. And
Although
we've-
often they look like the effect estimates are way too big, and they're not here.
and they're not here. But I think we find that somewhat irritating that there's so much prominence given to studies what we on average consider to be methodologically particularly weak.
Yeah.
We have not found one yet that has been particularly strong.
Well, and that's why I've said I want to see more. I want to do more trials, but you don't believe they could ever be done.
Maybe an answer to your question about why you have a little bit more, you put a little bit more credence in this study is because certainly I was impressed with the strength of the outcome. And I think we don't see that necessarily in other studies. In the 1,300 cancers that were identified, they were verified. And that gives me a little bit more,
They didn't
Yeah, I don't
just
think
accept
that
the
was what-
insurance claim number.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They had somebody, a second set of eyes actually verify it and they looked at the medical record. But
Yep.
still, I think it has some of the same basic flaws.
All right. Can I have the last word?
Sir.
All right. So a couple of things about this that I liked and I didn't like. So kudos to anybody who puts when you have a whole bunch of effect estimates that you are measures of association that you want to show us, their figure, which is, by the way, just figure. It has no figure number, which
That's
I
right.
liked.
It's only one figure.
But people who put all of those estimates into a figure rather than a table, so a forest plot type figure, just makes me, I mean, you can read that so easily and look at what's going on.
Not much.
And but you can see that very easily. And I just, kudos to anybody who does that. Second, did you notice that this study was registered at clinicaltrials.gov despite the fact that it is not an intervention?
I didn't notice that.
I was curious as to why, and I went and looked it up, and it is in fact registered, and it doesn't sound like there's any nested trial within it that I could find. Maybe there is, and I just didn't see it, but I was kind of surprised by that.
Well, it's an ethically honorable thing they did.
Yeah.
Can I have the last word?
Well, I'm not there yet, but yes, you can.
Did they register the outcomes that they were measuring
They did.
for this analysis? Is that what you mean?
They did. Yep.
Wow.
They do have p-values in their table 1, which, is not my thing. But my favorite line from the whole thing, all medical information was collegially reviewed by an independent medical expert. I like that. Don, what's your last?
I just will have you guys both notice that the reference numbers are outside of the period.
The reference
the
numbers
way
are
I do it, too.
outside the period.
It's the correct way to do it.
That is the correct way to do it.
As Don is referencing the Twitter poll that I took, which
It's very interesting, actually.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
So the question is, when you put a reference, do you put it inside the punctuation or outside the punctuation?
Yeah.
And I thought there must be a right or a wrong answer,
There
and
is.
we took a poll.
There is.
And the poll was evenly divided. And apparently there are
Half
two
of
style
them
guides.
are wrong.
There are two style guides, and one says one and one says the other. So it's this was real news to me.
Well,
so
maybe we should go further. Like, what about putting a citation within the sentence, like after a comma?
how about if you put it in the middle of a
before a comma.
word?
Yeah.
How about if you put the names of the authors in parentheses in the middle of the sentence?
Okay, we could do that.
That really bothers
All
me.
right.
Detract
moving
from
on.
readability. I like that.
Moving on.
By the way, this was done by the Sorbonne. Do you know that they invented chocolate twice? That's why
There's a joke in there that I don't get because I don't speak French.
This is where we get bonbons.
Oh, that is going to be.
Oh, it's making me very sore.
Oh, jeez. Between the two of you, the
Yeah.
amount of editing. Do you
But
know
they
how
were,
much?
they were painful. Hence Sorbonnes.
Can we? Now you make Nick laugh. That was so bad. You made Nick laugh. Oh. Okay, let's move on. So in our second segment, we want to talk about something that people who do clinical trials work know intimately about, but we think that it's possible that the rest of the world, people who don't do clinical trials or people who are outside
What are
the
we
world of
talking about?
epidemiology. Yeah, Chris.
Hang on.
Chris,
You'll
you'll find
get
out.
there.
You will find out
Settle
because
down, cowboy.
just so the listener knows, we have meetings ahead of time to discuss the topics, and then we run into Chris in the hall, and he has promptly forgotten what the topic is. So Chris will now be learning that the topic for today is data safety and monitoring boards.
Oh, I knew that. I knew that. I know. I prepped for this one.
So Don, you wanted to talk about data safety and monitoring boards. Why did you want to talk about it? Tell us what they are and why it is that you want to talk about them.
Well, part of the reason is that I find that I've mentioned it to people who I would have thought would know what they are, and a surprising number of people actually don't know what a DSMB is, and I find myself having to explain it to people. And I think in the context of some of the topics that have come up on these podcasts in terms of in terms of safety and in terms of ethical review and in terms of registering these studies, the concept of a DSMB, I think, is something that would be worthwhile for our listeners to understand. What a DSMB is: a Data Safety and Monitoring Board. And in essence, what it is a group of individuals who have nothing to do with the fundamental study. They didn't write it. They didn't contribute to it in any way. They're not funded by the funder. They volunteer to be part of this process, and the process is
no conflict of interest either.
And they have to have no conflict of interest whatsoever with what the study is about. And in essence, what it is kind of a ethical monitoring of the study as it goes along. And it's impaneled at the beginning of the study, and there are parameters that are set up, and there are stopping rules that are set up such that if there is above a certain level of risk or harm to the individuals who are involved in the study, or if the study gets to the point where it cannot prove what it was set out to prove, the Data Safety and Monitoring Board has the power, it's invested with power, to stop the study. Because either it's one arm of containing an intervention is found to be harmful, or one arm is found to be overly efficacious, so that they stop the study and they offer this beneficial effect or beneficial intervention to the other arm. Or the third one is that they can stop the study because they've gotten, say, halfway through the study, and there's an interim analysis, which typically is not divulged to the investigators, is only divulged to the Data Safety and Monitoring Board, shows that even if you enrolled all of the people for the duration of the study to complete your sample size, that you will not achieve the outcome that you built this study to try to determine. And that's stopping it for futility.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, these are boards which are impaneled to oversee the aspects of the study related to safety and then also efficacy.
Right.
And they have the ability to, as you say, stop the study if what they're observing in the data, and they are allowed to do interim analyses of the data. They have to be pre-planned, and they have to be accounted for in the final way that we describe the study results. But they are empowered to stop the study if things look, as you say, overly bad or overly good. But they are not beholden to the investigators. They make the decisions
totally independent
themselves.
And this, we should also add that this is distinct from the mandate of an institutional review board, whose job is to review a protocol and determine whether the protocol is ethically sound or not, and also to some degree to follow the conduct of the study in terms of the conduct of the trial. I mean, the Data Safety Monitoring Board, the key word there is data. The DSMB is not impaneled to make sure that consent forms were filled out or that the protocol was followed religiously. That is not their mandate. They are looking solely at the results of the trial that are generated. And often a DSMB will include its own independent statistician to do those analyses, recognizing that the statistician who works for the sponsor may also share this conflict of interest. And so, the interest in trying to make sure that their conclusions are unbiased mandates the use of a statistician who has access to the data that is unconflicted by the study team itself.
Okay, so we don't let people do this themselves because they have a conflict. They have a vested interest in the results of the study. So we turn this over to a body who is empowered to do something with this information.
Are you on a DSMB, Matt?
I have been on DSMBs, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm on 2 right now.
I'm on 1 right now.
Yeah.
And does every clinical trial have to have a DSMB?
No, not necessarily. Clinical, mostly phase 3 intervention studies generally will have a DSMB. Many phase 2 studies will also have a DSMB, and actually some phase 1 studies also have a DSMB, depending on the degree of risk implied. So
risk
a lot
is
of
the
them
key.
do.
Risk is the key. So we do, if we're going to do a behavioral intervention for which we're not particularly concerned about the risk, there may not be a DSMB necessary. You would need to have a data safety monitoring plan, but you don't necessarily need a data safety and monitoring board.
For example, we did a randomized controlled trial of an mHealth intervention to promote continuing medical education amongst HIV doctors. So this is not a medical intervention because we're not changing the health of the recipients who are the HIV doctors. We're just seeing whether they study more and whether they do better on an exam. And so we did not impanel a DSMB for that because there was no safety issue around whether they study or not Well, I suppose indirectly to the patients there might be, but you see what I'm saying. We're not following a health outcome, and there's no health intervention. So for that, we did not feel there was a need for DSMB.
Yep. And so, to me, there's no question these data safety monitoring boards have value. That they are there to protect patient safety, and they are there for ethical reasons. The question is, though, can these what are the unintended harms of having a DSMB? And Don's giving me a frowny face that suggests he doesn't think there are any.
No. I'm just trying to think of what they might be.
Well, there's a curious.
But let me preface with the fact that in general, I'm a huge proponent of data safety. I mean, we need them, but I do think there are some potential problems.
Right. I mean, I'm going to quote a recent example, but there's the potential for some gamesmanship in terms of how you interpret the actions of the DSMB. It's kind of like the Federal Reserve, and every time the Chairman Powell says anything, everyone gets very excited and tries to interpret the heck out of it. It's like Nostradamus. But with DSMBs, it's also like the DSMB met and did this thing. That is to say, they authorized the continuation of the study, and that could well lead people to assume, therefore, the study, the intervention is going to succeed. So, for example, we are intensely interested about the results of an ongoing phase 3 trial of a maternal respiratory syncytial virus vaccine. And the study is being sponsored by Novavax in Maryland, and they recently had their DSMB meeting. And one of the stopping rules established in the mandate, in the charter, of the DSMB was that they would stop the study if the vaccine had efficacy below, I think it was 45%, but we're going to I'll use that as a placeholder. I think it was 45%, but the number is in some case arbitrary. So if it was less than 45%, they would say this is not a viable product and they're going to abandon it. And if it was 45% or above, that means they continue to complete the trial. Mm-hmm. And so they continue to complete the trial. And the RSV community was collectively thrilled about this because to them, they're now thinking that therefore the RSV vaccine is going to be a winner. But in fact, all we know is that it is not a loser, but we don't know that it is a very good vaccine yet. We don't know very much. And we have read a lot into that decision that has generated a great deal of speculation and excitement, which may be, maybe it's 46% and we're going to be sad in 6 months.
Don, do you have any? None come to mind.
None come to mind.
So the one that always comes to my mind, which is that data, because we impanel data safety and monitoring boards, we tend to look at the data early, and I want to be very clear to the listener that we account for that statistically. So that's not it's not quote unquote cheating, although there can be controversial how we actually choose to do it. But the DSMB is then powered, as you said, to stop the study early if the effects are greater than what we expected. But the thing that we know is that when we have large effects from underpowered studies, those effects tend to be overestimates. And this is stopping studies early tends to lead to overly optimistic views of particular drugs or interventions or devices because we stop them early. Now, you absolutely can make the argument that it's unethical to continue, that we have an ethical obligation then to offer this intervention or drug or whatever it is to the control arm. But it does mean that we don't get the right answer, right answer in quotes there, meaning the effect that we would have observed had we just run the study out until its completion. So there's a tension there between the ethics of protecting the patient and the ethics of getting the right answer so that we protect all patients or protect all patients, give patients the right answer about what it is the treatment benefit is going to be. And I just, that's sort of the one thing that's always nagging in my mind when I think about the empowerment of DSMBs to shut things down early.
Right.
Yeah, but that's a pretty powerful argument on the other side.
The protecting patients.
The ethical argument. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you not see though that if we
I do.
give people an overly optimistic, we have some wonder drug and actually it's better than the standard of care, but it's not, it's not amazingly better than standard of care.
Well,
that would be
the precision of our
unethical too.
The precision of the effect size will be diminished because we're starting.
It's not just the precision; it's the point estimate.
And the point estimate, right? The precision as well as where the point estimate actually is will be more inaccurate if we're stopping it early. I completely agree with that. But if the effect is so large that it already seems to be showing a easily beneficial effect, then I find it hard to not offer that to the control arm, to the other arm that's not getting that.
I hear you. Although we also know that even trials that are carried out to completion tend to overestimate effects because of the populations that they enroll. They're designed to show effects, and therefore when they go to general populations, often we don't see the benefit. So then you stop it early and you're putting it together. Anyway, that's
the nature of the work we do.
Yeah. But I do, that is okay. Anyway, DSMBs, we thought it was worthwhile talking about them because I think that the general public might not be aware that there are these systems and structures in place to actually protect patients and take care of the safety of both the patients and the data. Okay, so let's move on to our third segment, which is our Amazing and Amusing, where we want to highlight some of the things that make our jobs even better than they already are, the weird, wacky things that go on, or the things that inspire us. And I'm going to go first, because mine is just a headline and it relates to what it was we were talking about in the first segment, which was the organic food. So this is an old one, but this was from a newspaper, let's call it, called The Un-Australian. Do you know The Un-Australian?
No.
And the headline from The Un-Australian, I don't have the year on this. I don't know. I think this was probably in 2015.
Is this a journal in New Zealand?
I don't know the answer to that.
I would think not.
But it was 2015, October of 2015. The headline is World Health Organization warns that consumption of kale leads to arrogance.
I've seen that. Wasn't that from The Onion?
No, it's from the Un-Australian.
I think that's good.
Which is,
but I think
there
that they
you go.
might be actually quoting from The Onion. I'm pretty sure that this showed up in one of the...
Okay, I'll look it up, but I don't think so.
But I like it.
I will go back and look at my sources. So, Chris, what do you got for us?
Sure. I'm going to loop back to a theme I brought up a couple of weeks ago, which is my dog Pepper. Who is less and less with Pepper because she's an old dog and she's grizzled and limpy and gimpy, and she's got terrible joint disease.
So far, this is kind of a downer, Chris.
Yeah, poor Pepper. She used to be great at catching frisbees, but now her frisbee catching days are over, and she sits on the carpet most of the time and kind of moans. So poor dog. And we took her to the vet, and the vet said you should give this poor dog some glucosamine. And I got very annoyed because I was aware of the big New England Journal of Medicine study from 2006 that said glucosamine and chondroitin sulfate supplements alone or in combination really don't seem to do anything in humans. And so why would it work in dogs?
Because dogs are different than humans. We always say humans are different than dogs.
And so I had that kind of irritated, bee in my bonnet.
Oh, there we go.
You worked it in there. So it comes back.
You cannot go without talking about bees. All right.
I found this study in Science Translational Medicine, and it totally hit the sweet spot for me.
Okay.
The title of the study is called Radiocarbon Dating Reveals Minimal Collagen Turnover in Both Healthy and Osteoarthritic Human Cartilage. So this is Human Translational Medicine 2016, and the lead author is Katja Heinemeier. Now, what they did, which is so cool, was basically to do carbon dating of cartilage. Like, how we do carbon dating of trees to see how old they are. They did the same thing, leveraging a natural experiment, which was the nuclear test ban in 1964. And before that, we were firing off nuclear bombs constantly, and the radioactive carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere went up at a sharp and scary level.
Okay.
But then it went down after they instituted the international test ban. So the effect is that, that carbon is incorporated into almost every bodily tissue that we have, including collagen. And so while you are, supposing you were born in 1930, and there were no nuclear bombs yet, and you were a growing young lad who went from 0 to 13 years, which is about the time that cartilage develops, and after that it stops, you would not expect to have much carbon-14 incorporated into the collagen matrix.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
Because there wasn't, right? Unless there was uptake of radioactive carbon C14 later on in life. So you can use the sort of age of the population and overlay that against the C14 levels in the atmosphere as a way of figuring out how much turnover is there in cartilage.
What does this have to do with Pepper?
So osteoarthritis is defined by the degradation of our cartilage matrix.
Okay.
And cartilage is formed of collagen fibers, which are these long strandy fibers secreted by these cells called chondrocytes. And then these cells also secrete an extracellular matrix called glycosaminoglycan. Okay? Which is kind of like a squishy, slimy substance that binds water and acts like a molecular sponge.
Gross.
And has a sort of a cushioning effect when you take steps. And so they wanted to know, there's been this ongoing debate, to what degree does the cartilage repair itself over time? Mm-hmm. And it is clear that it does not repair itself very much because, we know that osteoarthritis tends to get worse and worse and worse, and there's very little we can do about it. But the question is, does it in fact turn over at all? Mm-hmm. And what they found through carbon dating is that there is apparently no turnover of the cartilage whatsoever.
That's bad.
And that when you look at the C14 deposition into cartilage, it is almost linearly associated with the ambient level of CO2 at the time that they were developing. So that is very interesting. And so you also have these sort of, you might say, well, okay, that's the average of cartilage, but
that's what I was going to say.
Perhaps when you have osteoarthritis and the cartilage is damaged, maybe the repair mechanisms ramp up, and so you would see an increased incorporation
I can believe
that. What you'd expect to see if that were true is that carbon dioxide, radioactive carbon 14 that had been laid into the cartilage matrix in 1963 would go down if there was repair, because after 1964, the radioactive CO2 levels in the atmosphere are going down.
Yep.
And so if there was repair going on, you would see that post 64, in those individuals, there would be a loss of this of radioactive uptake, and you basically don't see any evidence that the C14 that has been incorporated into the cartilage matrix changes once it has been laid down at all. And it in fact acts like sort of like a dead tree ring, where what you see at that point in time remains there permanently.
Okay.
They also found some things which were really interesting, which is that the cartilage growth appears to be centripetal, meaning that if you're looking at like the knee, if you're looking at the knee, the center of the cartilage across the knee joint develops first, and then it grows radially out from there. And so you can also use that as an internal control to see like tree rings. If you look at the center versus the periphery of the cartilage, there should be different levels of radioactive carbon in there because they were laid down, possibly a decade apart from each other. And so you can use that also to index against the ambient the radioactive CO2 levels to see if there's a change. And there is a change. And that change is exactly as you would expect, that there's a differential depending on whether you're pre-1964, meaning that CO2 is going up. And so the peripheral part of the cartilage should have more radioactive carbon in it than less. And that is true pre-1964. Or after 1964, that the relationship goes down because there is less in the later years of life.
That's cool.
I thought this was a really clever way of addressing this question.
Very interesting. Cool. Okay.
Based on that, I think my cartilage probably glows in the dark. Because I was 11 in 1964.
Yeah, you should look at this figure, Don. It's kind of
I was wondering why my knees are glowing when I turn out the lights.
1964. I wasn't born for another 50 years.
Yeah.
See that, Matt?
Wow. Beautiful. Chris is showing me a figure.
C14 levels go up and then they go down.
Very cool.
So I'm reaching back also. So I've pulled a paper that was published in Studies in Conservation.
There we go.
So it was published in Studies in Conservation 1990 by Paula Romayo, Adila Alcaro, and Cesar Viana. And they noted the fact that apparently there is an adage that the best way to clean your gold leaf, or the best way to clean fragile painted layers on low-fired ceramics like clay objects and painted cork, is using human saliva.
This is an adage? People say this?
Apparently those in the conservation industry, where they have old artifacts made of gold leaf and of pottery, say that the best way to clean these objects is
I honestly thought you were going
using human saliva.
I honestly thought you were going to say
should lick them?
there's more than one way to skin a cat, and you were going to tell us that was wrong.
There are several ways. There's only one way.
So the title of this paper is Human Saliva as a Cleaning Agent for Dirty Surfaces. So
Okay.
they wanted to explore whether, in fact, this is true. So
Compared to what else?
compared to...
Using your sister's
Hold
toothbrush.
on. 2-methylheptane xylene or white spirits.
Okay.
So they're,
okay, yeah,
they're
that's what I
comparing
would
it
have used.
to other cleaning agents.
Methylheptane is what I go for.
And what they did was that they did side-by-side comparisons with all of those various objects or various cleaning solvents and looked at the ability of saliva in comparison to all of those to be able to clean oil paintings or gold leaf or pottery. And they found that saliva was far superior
Really?
to any of those other substances.
works.
And then what they did was they ran it through various procedures to try to isolate from human saliva what is the fraction that's actually most active in terms of the cleansing effect. And it turns out
the
that
ingredient?
alpha amylase is an enzyme which is found in high concentration in human saliva, which is particularly beneficial in terms of cleaning these various substances. And they say that one of the reasons for saliva having good cleaning power on dirty surfaces, one class of enzymes, lipases, catalyzes degradation of fatty substances and other classes, hydrolases, catalyzes degradation of hydrolytic substances. However, one of the hydrolases, alpha amylase, seems to be principally responsible for the excellent cleaning power of saliva.
Wow. So we should.
This is really the basis of Spit Shine.
Okay, so I got a question.
wow.
Did they look at all at how effective it is when you're a little kid and your mother licks her finger and then rubs it on your face to try and get the ice cream off?
No, that was
That's
supposedly
a
a follow-up
follow-on
study.
That's
yeah.
going to be a follow. All right.
Wow. So were they licking the objects, or did they extract the saliva? They have a bucket of saliva.
No,
bucket.
they had a little pipette. They stuck it in your mouth and they sucked out the saliva and they
Sucked
used
up some
that.
saliva.
Yeah,
Wow.
like a saliva trap.
We are curiously germophobic about so many things, so many inanimate objects. Like you would think that like licking your chandeliers would be a terribly dangerous thing to do, and you would not do that. But like there's so much romanticism about kissing people, which is like if you think about it empirically, a very unwise thing to do.
That is a direct
And yet
inoculation.
it's very popular.
Yeah, it is.
I've heard. Okay,
So don't lick your chandeliers, but do kiss your wife.
that is the end of our program.
I'm glad we come up with some sort of moral lesson
Or
that
your
comes out of
husband.
this.
If you have
Aesop's fables.
If you have any feedback on this or any other episode,
We don't want to hear it.
or apparently licking chandeliers, and you want to suggest a topic for us to take on, you can tweet us at @PopHealthyX, or you can tweet me at @ProfMattFox, or Chris at @ID.Gill, or Don at DTheo1. You can find us on the Population Health Exchange website at www.pophealthyx.org. We want to thank Leslie Talalian, Director of Lifelong Learning at the BU School of Public Health, for supporting the podcast, and Nick Guler for sound and editing. Thanks for joining us, and make sure to download our next episode.